How many of you have ever wondered what it really means to be a man? Not the superficial idea of masculinity that we all know, but the true concept of being a man, free from stereotypes and social pressures. In a world where image and performance often determine who we are, being a real man goes far beyond simple appearance or expected behaviors. Being a genuine, authentic man requires something deeper, something that society refuses, in many cases, to understand. What is masculinity? After all, who decides what makes someone a man? In many circles, the answer still seems to be simple: physical strength, emotional toughness, and the relentless pursuit of success. But what if these characteristics don't align with who we are inside? What if true masculinity is not defined by what we show the world, but by what we choose to embrace from the inside out? Here in this video, we're going to challenge all of that. Let's explore a new path. A path that goes beyond what is imposed and invites us to understand what it really means to have the courage to be who we are. Because being a real man is not about fitting into the mold that society creates. It's about having the courage to live according to your own values, regardless of external pressures. Now imagine the power of being a man who doesn't have to perform. Imagine the freedom that comes with that. If you can free yourself from the need to please others, you may discover that true power lies in simply being yourself. We live in a society where masculinity is often treated as a performance. From childhood, we are bombarded with images of the ideal man, an archetype of physical strength, emotional control, and success. These stereotypes are not just external expectations, but models that we end up internalizing over time. But what happens when a man begins to realize that these expectations are just a facade, a role he is being forced to play, without any connection to who he really is? The idea of performative masculinity is not new. Since ancient times, philosophers such as Nietzsche have questioned the standards imposed by society. He believed that traditional morality, including gender norms, was a form of repression, preventing human beings from fully expressing themselves. Modern men, by following this model of masculinity, are in a way renouncing their true nature in favor of an imposed ideal. This is a contradiction. In order to be considered a real man, they must, in most cases, hide their vulnerabilities and act according to a pre-established script. It is a performance that begins early. In the first years of life, boys are taught not to cry, to be strong, and not to show weakness. These teachings, although well-intentioned, create a distance between what men feel and what they express. And when they are faced with their own emotions, they often encounter an emotional wall built over the years. The consequences of this are profound. Many men end up losing the ability to truly connect with others and even with themselves. The question we must ask ourselves then is this: why do we continue to accept these patterns? Wouldn't it be wiser to seek a balance where strength is combined with vulnerability, toughness with empathy? The performance of masculinity not only imprisons us, but also makes us incapable of embracing our humanity. We are all, in a way, acting, hoping that someone will applaud. But who really benefits from this? This dilemma is more complex than it seems. Living according to these stereotypes is not only tiring, but also alienating. The pressure to conform to an imposed model of masculinity is one of the reasons why so many men end up living lives of silent dissatisfaction. They seek validation in places where they find no real meaning. The constant search for success in the material and emotional sense, without understanding the root of their own values, leaves them empty, disconnected, and often lonely. Performative masculinity isn't just about external behavior. It's actually a mental game. Constantly comparing yourself to others, needing to be admired, proving yourself. All of these are deeply rooted in the desire to be accepted. But what if true acceptance started from the inside out? What if, instead of worrying about what others expect, you could simply be yourself? The idea that masculinity needs to be constantly demonstrated is, at its core, an illusion. True masculinity cannot be measured by muscle mass, emotional toughness, or financial status. It is not about how the world sees us, but how we see ourselves within ourselves. Authentic masculinity is a radical choice to live according to our deepest values, regardless of external pressures or societal expectations. This choice, while simple in principle, requires monumental courage, The courage to disconnect from expectations of being what others want us to be, and the courage to be true to who we are. Nietzsche once again offers us a relevant perspective here. He challenged his followers to abandon traditional morality and seek true freedom through individual affirmation. For Nietzsche, being authentic was an act of creation, creating our own morals, our own truths. He saw conformity to social norms as a form of decadence. This vision of masculinity is not about following rules, but about rebelling against a system that limits our true expression. But what if this definition of true masculinity were more paradoxical than it seems? What if a man's true strength lay in his ability to be vulnerable, to allow himself to feel and express genuine emotions without the need to hide behind a facade? The concept of authentic masculinity is not a rejection of strength, but rather a reinvention of it. Being a real man does not mean repressing softness or empathy, but rather integrating these aspects with physical strength and emotional resilience. Authentic masculinity also involves being at peace with one's own imperfection. There is no room for the idea of a perfect man who never fails. True strength lies in the ability to get up after a fall, to learn from mistakes, and to embrace life's challenges honestly. Being a real man is accepting that, no matter how much we try to control the world around us, what matters is how we deal with what happens inside us. And it is this internal journey that defines our masculinity. The modern world demands so much of us that the pressure to always be strong and perfect often blinds us to what really matters. Instead of following the stereotypes that society imposes on us, we must seek authenticity, the kind that is rooted in a deep understanding of who we are. True masculinity is not a form of passive resistance, but a form of active action, which begins within us and is reflected in our attitudes in the world. What if, instead of following the old molds, we began to build masculinity from our own truth? If we asked ourselves every day, what does it mean to be a man who is true to me, not to others? The answer to this question can be disconcerting, but it is in it that we find true freedom. Having courage is not simply about being willing to fight or win. It is about the willingness to stand up for what we believe in, even if it puts us at odds with the world around us. To be a real man, as we have already mentioned, is not about following an imposed model, but about being able to take a stand, to have backbone. That is, to have the strength to assert your identity and your values, even when society tries to conform us. This requires a courage that goes beyond the superficiality of simple physical resistance. True courage is an internal struggle. It is the courage to look in the mirror and, instead of trying to please others, ask yourself, am I being true to who I really am? This kind of courage is not a virtue reserved only for moments of great crisis, but is a constant choice. It is about making daily choices that reflect your inner truth, even if the world tells you that you are wrong. Nietzsche teaches us that the courage to live according to our own values is one of the greatest forms of freedom we can achieve. But this kind of freedom does not come without challenges. When we choose to take a stand, when we choose not to be molded by others, we inevitably face resistance. This resistance can come from family, friends, or society in general. But paradoxically, it is precisely this resistance that solidifies our position. Each challenge, each criticism does not make us failures, but rather stronger individuals, more authentic and more firm in our values. The concept of spine that we are exploring here is a powerful metaphor. Having a spine does not mean being inflexible or uncompromising, but rather having a solid foundation of principles that allows us to be flexible in many situations without losing our essence. A spineless person who constantly gives in to other people's expectations loses himself. On the other hand, someone with spine, even if they change their opinions over time, does so from a consistent foundation of values that never break. Courage is also a matter of vulnerability, and this leads us to a great contradiction. For many, true courage seems to be about being tough, but in reality, it is quite the opposite. Being vulnerable, allowing yourself to be seen as a person with fears, flaws, and uncertainties takes even greater courage. But this vulnerability does not weaken us. On the contrary, it reveals our true strength. We see an example of this in historical figures who, over the centuries, have challenged norms and traditions. From ancient philosophers to contemporary leaders, those who have excelled have not been those who have followed traditional molds of masculinity, but rather those who have dared to defy expectations and live according to their own truths. They had the courage to be different, to be genuine, and that is what made them truly respected. However, the courage to take a stand is not a skill that comes naturally to everyone. Fear of judgment, rejection, failure, these are the biggest obstacles most of us face. But how can we cultivate this courage? First, understanding that fear is a natural reaction, not a sign of weakness. The true test of courage is to act in spite of fear. In practice, this means leaving your comfort zone and exposing yourself to the risk of being misunderstood, criticized, or even rejected, knowing that the true reward is in remaining true to yourself, regardless of the external consequences. Here then, we have an intriguing paradox. The more we are willing to be authentic, the more exposed we become. And the more exposed we are, the more deeply we connect with our true essence. It's a continuous cycle where courage and vulnerability feed each other. Ultimately, true masculinity is not about avoiding risk, but about the courage to face it head-on, knowing that what matters is not the criticism, but our own authenticity. Authenticity is not just an individual virtue. It also has a profound impact on our relationships. When we choose to live authentically, without the need to perform to please others, we begin to attract people who also seek genuine connections. True masculinity is not isolated. It is reflected in the way we relate to others, and more importantly, how we allow others to connect with us. The relationship between courage and respect is fundamental in this process. When a man has the courage to be himself without hiding his vulnerabilities or conforming to external expectations, he becomes more respected. Not because he conforms to an imposed model, but because he is being real. And this courage is not seen simply as a weakness, but as a strength. Others see that we are not hiding behind a facade, and this makes us more interesting, more trustworthy, and more valuable in relationships. However, this process is not easy. For many, being authentic in a world that constantly values superficiality and performance is a challenge. As we've seen, there's a lot of pressure to behave in specific ways, as if certain qualities or behaviors are prerequisites for being a real man. However, when we break these expectations and allow ourselves to be genuine, relationships become deeper. We're no longer attracting people based on a superficial image, but on who we really are. For example, in romantic relationships, vulnerability is often seen as weakness, when in reality, it's the key to a deep connection. By being vulnerable, by showing our insecurities and fears, we're allowing the other person to see us completely. And it's in this space of honesty that true intimacy emerges. Ironically enough, by allowing himself to be vulnerable, a man becomes stronger, not because he avoids pain or criticism, but because he's able to face it head-on and move forward with courage and a sense of authenticity. Furthermore, this authenticity creates an environment of reciprocity. When we are genuine, we allow others to be genuine too. We are no longer wearing masks or hiding parts of ourselves, and this creates an openness that is essential to building strong bonds. True masculinity, therefore, not only strengthens the relationship with oneself, but also enhances the connection with others. Honesty and the courage to be who we really are generates genuine respect and admiration, which are fundamental to any lasting relationship. On the other hand, performance, or the attempt to be someone we are not, results in superficial relationships. In this context, interactions become transactional, based on an exchange of images and expectations, rather than a true exchange of emotions and values. When the relationship is based on performance, there is always a distance, an invisible gap that prevents true connection. And this is something that many men, in their search for social acceptance, end up experiencing: the frustration of being admired but not truly known. So the question we must ask ourselves is, what do we really want from our relationships? If we want real and meaningful connections, the only way to achieve them is through authenticity. It's not about putting yourself out there in any way, but about being true to yourself and allowing others to see who you are without embellishment or disguise. This authenticity, as we've seen, is the foundation of all types of relationships, whether with friends, partners, or coworkers. By being authentic, A man not only earns respect and admiration, but also creates a space where he can be more vulnerable and thus stronger. It's a complex but profound dynamic where true masculinity not only reflects itself in a man's life, but also shapes the world around him. Courage and integrity are not qualities that come instantly. They are cultivated over time with deliberate practice and constant reflection. Being an authentic man is not about getting rid of doubt or fear, but about being able to face those feelings with honesty and courage. True integrity is not about perfection, but about consistency. Being true to yourself, even when it's challenging. One of the most effective ways to cultivate courage and integrity is to start small. Be honest. Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try, no one truly sees you? It's not about lacking value. It's about knowing how to make it visible. The social game isn't fair. If you don't know the rules, you're left behind, but you don't have to stay invisible. In the Anti-Weak audiobook, I share 22 strategies to master interactions, gain respect, and step out of the shadows. Click the link in the description now and start the transformation only you can make happen. Every decision we make, no matter how small, shapes our character. When we make decisions based on what we truly believe, rather than acting according to what others expect of us, we are taking a step toward true masculinity. But how do we know when we are being truly authentic and not just reacting to external pressures? How do we keep others' expectations from derailing us? The first step to cultivating courage and integrity is self-awareness. This involves an honest examination of our own beliefs, fears, desires, and insecurities. Many men fail to develop courage because they lack a clear understanding of who they are or what they truly value. Society often teaches us to seek external validation, whether through social status, physical appearance, or professional achievements, rather than teaching us to look inward and understand our own motivations. But it is in this space of introspection that true courage is born, when we begin to question the norms and realize that our strength comes from within. After self-awareness comes acceptance. The courage to be authentic requires us to embrace our weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Most men are afraid to show their insecurities because society tends to associate vulnerability with weakness. But as we've discussed, true strength lies in allowing ourselves to be seen as we truly are, without hiding anything. By doing so, we are creating a solid foundation for integrity. Integrity is not about being infallible, but about being willing to face our flaws honestly, learn from them, and move forward without losing our true selves. Another crucial aspect of developing courage and integrity is the daily practice of consistency. Every action we take should be a manifestation of what we believe, without exception. This means that if we are to live by our values, we must do so not only when it is convenient, but also when it is difficult. True integrity requires consistency between what we say and what we do, regardless of the circumstances. When words and actions are aligned, our confidence in ourselves grows, because we know that we are being true to what we believe. This also brings us to the concept of self-discipline. To maintain courage and integrity in a world that constantly tries to shape us, we need to have discipline. It is not just about acting ethically or fairly when others are watching, but also when no one is watching. True discipline is internal and is what keeps us on track, even when the temptation to give in to external expectations is strong. As the philosopher Aristotle says, virtue is a habit, and it is the continued practice that transforms behavior into something authentic and lasting. However, even with all these practices, doubt and fear will still be present. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. Many men avoid acting courageously because they are afraid of failure or rejection. But true courage comes from the ability to see fear, acknowledge it, and still make the right decision. Failure is inevitable, but every mistake brings with it a lesson that makes us stronger and more authentic. To illustrate this, we can look at the example of great leaders or historical figures who stood out for their courage. They were not those who followed the easy or accepted path, but those who made difficult decisions, guided by their own convictions. These individuals were not fearless by nature, but they had the courage to remain true to themselves, even in the face of adversity. This is what made them examples of true masculinity. Ultimately, courage and integrity are not qualities that come instantly. They are cultivated over time through practice, reflection, and the courage to be who we are, without fear of judgment. And by living this way, we create a solid foundation for a masculinity that is real, true, and respectable. Integrity, more than any other quality, is what truly defines true masculinity. However, integrity is not something that is constructed superficially, as a facade to please others. It is a constant and internal practice, a reflection of the consistency between what we believe and what we do. It is the state of being true to ourselves, not only when it is convenient, but also when no one is looking. Integrity is, in fact, what solidifies a man's identity, because it goes beyond external words and actions. It touches the core of our essence. We could say that integrity is the essence of authenticity. Without it, masculinity becomes an empty concept, because there is no coherence between what a man claims to be and who he really is. In this sense, integrity is a solid foundation on which we can build all other aspects of our lives: relationships, career, mental health, and of course, the respect of other men. A man of integrity is not afraid to admit his flaws, because he knows that these flaws do not define his identity. What does is his ability to learn from them and move forward. Aristotle, when speaking about virtue, reminds us that it is the mean between extremes. A man's virtue lies not in his perfection, but in his ability to act justly and ethically, even when doing so requires sacrifice. Integrity, therefore, is not a fixed point to be achieved, but a daily commitment to what is right, aligned with one's deepest values. Thus, being a man of integrity does not mean being infallible, but having the constant commitment to act in accordance with the truth, even when it seems more difficult or risky. True masculinity cannot exist without integrity, because without it, a man gets lost in his own lies. Every little lie, every little deviation from our deepest beliefs weakens our identity and our confidence. This brings us to a fundamental question. What happens when a man loses his integrity? The answer is simple. He loses his ability to respect himself. Without self-respect, it is not possible to create a solid foundation of trust in others. Masculinity, then, that becomes a fragile construct based on external expectations and not on the true essence of man. Therefore, integrity is more than a moral concept. It is the foundation of a successful and fulfilled life. Without it, any achievement loses its value. A man's true strength lies not in what he accomplishes, but in the consistency with which he lives his principles and values. Being a man of integrity means challenging yourself every day to be better, to not give in to the temptations of pleasing others at the expense of our truth. It is a continuous process of improvement, where each mistake is an opportunity to learn and grow, not to hide or deny who we are. Living an authentic life can seem like a difficult choice, especially in a world that constantly pushes us to conform. The pressure to fit in, please others, and follow social norms is immense, but the consequences of living authentically are profound and transformative. When a man chooses to be true to himself, he not only defies society, but also embraces a journey of personal growth that brings real, if often unseen, benefits. First, let's address the consequences. There's no denying that choosing to live authentically can be challenging. By distancing ourselves from social expectations, we risk being misunderstood, judged, or even rejected. Criticism can be harsh, and loneliness can set in, especially when we choose unconventional paths. However, these consequences are not signs of failure, but rather milestones on the path to stronger, more authentic masculinity. Each criticism, each challenge tests us, and by facing them, we become more resilient and more confident in our convictions. In fact, these initial difficulties are often the tests that life offers us to test our true strength. As we have already discussed, courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. The man who is true to his values and principles eventually gains an inner confidence that does not depend on the approval of others. By being authentic, he begins to realize that the approval that really matters is his own. And this inner approval is the solid foundation on which he can build a life of real meaning. Now let's talk about the benefits. When we free ourselves from external pressures and begin to live according to our true essence, the benefits begin to reveal themselves in unexpected ways. One of the greatest benefits of being true to ourselves is the genuine respect that comes with being true to ourselves. When a man acts with integrity and stands firm in his convictions, he begins to attract people who share similar values. Relationships become deeper and more meaningful because connections are no longer based on superficial impressions or performance, but on the true essence of who we are. Another powerful benefit is the feeling of freedom. Living authentically means no longer being held captive by the expectations of others. This freedom is transformative. When we stop seeking external validation, we begin to make choices based on what is best for us, not what others expect of us. This freedom does not mean selfishness, but rather the courage to prioritize our own growth and happiness, knowing that by doing so, our presence becomes more genuine and impactful. In addition, true authenticity brings a sense of purpose. When a man chooses to live according to his own values, he aligns with his deepest purpose, and this brings an inner satisfaction that no external success can replace. He does not live to impress, but to contribute in a meaningful way, whether in his family, at work, or in society. This sense of purpose creates a constant drive to move forward, even in the face of adversity, because what is at stake is not external rewards, but alignment with his own truth. Finally, by embracing authenticity, a man also gains the ability to lead with integrity. He does not need to manipulate or deceive to earn respect. His behavior and choices speak for themselves. This creates an aura of confidence and respect around you, making you a natural figure of influence without having to work hard to be admired. However, it is important to understand that the benefits of being genuine do not come immediately. Often, you have to go through hardships before the rewards become apparent. True masculinity does not offer instant or easy rewards. Instead, it requires patience, perseverance, and the courage to continue on the path, even when the results are not immediate. Nothing illustrates true masculinity better than the examples of historical and contemporary figures who chose to be authentic, defying norms and expectations. These individuals not only questioned traditional molds of masculinity, but also demonstrated that true strength lies in the ability to live according to one's own truth, not social conventions. A classic example comes from the philosophy of Socrates, whose life and teachings embody authentic masculinity. Socrates was not concerned with appearance or social status. He was concerned with the search for truth and the integrity of his actions. His courage to question authority and challenge established wisdom made him a symbol of intellectual and moral resistance. For him, being authentic meant always questioning, always seeking to understand the world on one's own terms, without bowing to the expectations imposed by others. Another example is Nelson Mandela, who, despite being imprisoned for 27 years, never abandoned his convictions of justice and equality. His integrity and courage were the keys to his struggle and ultimately to the change he brought to the world. Mandela was a man who remained true to his values, even in the most inhumane circumstances. He did not bow to the pressures of his time. Instead, he used his authenticity to lead and inspire not only his country, but the entire world. His life teaches us that true masculinity lies in standing firm on our principles, even in the face of the most extreme adversity. In literature, we find another example of authentic masculinity in Henry David Thoreau, a thinker and writer who abandoned the conventional life to live a simpler life in alignment with nature. His work, Walden, is a meditation on how to reconnect with one's inner truth by living honestly and directly. Thoreau challenged social norms by opting for a more contemplative life, showing that true masculinity lies not in conforming to the frenetic pace of society, but in living truthfully and intentionally. In the contemporary realm, we can look to Barack Obama, whose leadership style and integrity transcended the expectations of a president. Obama never bowed to criticism or pressure to be a strong man in the traditional sense of the word. He was authentic in his thinking, his expression, and his political decisions. His ability to stay true to his values while adapting to the complexities of global politics is a modern example of authentic masculinity. These examples show us that being a real man does not mean following a fixed script or adopting predefined characteristics. Instead, it means being true to yourself, being able to stand up for yourself with courage, and standing firm for your principles, regardless of external expectations. True masculinity lies in the ability to be authentic, to not be molded by others, and to use that authenticity to make a difference in the world. These men and thinkers not only defined their own masculinities, they inspired generations to question norms and live according to their own truths. Each of them, in their own way, showed us that true strength does not come from a facade, but from a life lived with integrity, courage, and above all, authenticity. Now that we've explored what it means to be a real man, one who lives with courage, integrity, and authenticity, it's time to take the final step, applying these principles to your daily life. The ideas we've discussed aren't just abstract concepts. They have the power to transform the way you live, relate to others, and see yourself. True masculinity isn't a destination to be reached, but an ongoing journey of self-discovery and action. Each of us has the capacity to be an authentic man. However, it takes more than simply understanding what's right. It takes courage to live in accordance with that truth, even when the world around us tries to pull us back into expectations and stereotypes. The journey to authenticity isn't easy, but it's also the most rewarding. It starts with a simple but powerful decision: choosing to live true to your own values without worrying about the approval of others. It's not about achieving perfection, but about continuing to try every day to be true to yourself. If you want to live a meaningful life, full of purpose and genuine respect, start today. Ask yourself, what really matters to me? Am I living according to my values, or am I just following what society says is important? By committing to your own truth, you begin to shape a life that is yours and yours alone. True masculinity is living without masks, being vulnerable but also standing firm. It's defying expectations and creating your own path. So start taking action, not tomorrow, not next week, but today. The first step to being a real man is being true to who you really are, and that journey starts now. If you're ready to take the next step and delve even deeper into personal development, get the audiobook Anti-Weak: 22 Strategies to Master Social Power. An invaluable and knowledgeable audiobook that offers tools and strategies to master social dynamics and achieve lasting personal power. The link is below in the description. Don't miss the opportunity to empower your journey and become the best version of yourself.